Hello, and welcome to Let the Shadows Speak, using light, shape, and contrast to create stronger photographs. Today we are going to look at shadows as more than the dark areas in a photograph. A shadow can support the main subject, frame it, guide our eyes through the image, or become the subject itself. Before we touch camera settings, we will begin with observation. We will look at what the light is drawing and how ordinary things such as railings, leaves, fences, people, and buildings can create strong shapes and patterns. First, see the light. Notice its direction, strength, and angle. Second, go shadow hunting. Look for repeating patterns, silhouettes, leading lines, and unusual shapes. Third, build the composition. Decide whether the shadow supports another subject or becomes the whole photograph. Fourth, expose for impact. Adjust the brightness so the shadow has the mood and strength you want. If we have time, we can play around with the lights and shadows here later. Before taking the picture, pause and look at the light. First ask, where is the sun? Light coming from the side often shows texture and shape. It can make steps, walls, leaves, and railings look more three-dimensional. Light coming from behind the subject can create a silhouette. It can also make the shadow more noticeable than the object itself. When the sun is high overhead, shadows are usually shorter and more compact. Next, look at the edges of the shadows. A bright, direct light creates hard, crisp edges. Those shadows often work well for bold patterns and graphic compositions. Cloudy or diffuse light creates softer edges. The shadows may be gentler and less dramatic. Time of day also changes what we see. Morning and late afternoon light creates longer shadows. Midday sun produces shorter shapes that stay closer to the object. In this photograph, the railings cast strong diagonal lines across the steps. The shadows repeat the structure of the railing, but they also become part of the composition. The main idea is simple. Look at the shadow before the object. Sometimes the most interesting photograph is not the object itself, it's the shape the light was placed beside it. Our first video. The video gave us several ways to use shadow creatively. Now we're going to make shadow hunting easier by looking for objects that reliably create interesting shapes. Instead of wandering around hoping a good shadow appears, look for shadow makers. First, look for lines and repetition. Railings, fences, blinds, stairs, benches, and bike racks can cast repeated lines or geometric patterns. These work especially well when the light comes from the side. Next, look for organic patterns. Leaves, branches, flowers, and grasses create less predictable shapes. They can turn a plain walk, sidewalk, wall, or table into a patterned background. A small breeze may change the design from one moment to the next. People can create human stories. A shadow selfie, two people holding hands, or someone stepping into a patch of light can suggest a story without showing every detail. In the top photograph, we do not need to see the people themselves to understand the moment. Architecture is another rich source. Windows, arches, columns, doorways, stairways, and roof lines can create strong blocks of light and darkness. The upper right photograph shows the building's shadow can divide the frame into bold shapes. Notice that the shadows do not always need to be completely recognizable. In the lower left photograph, the circular patches of light become an abstract pattern. In the lower right image, the tree shadows add texture and movement to an ordinary walkway. A useful habit to ask, what nearby object is drawing the shadow and where could I stand to make the pattern stronger? Move a few steps to the left or right, try photographing only the shadow, then include part of the object that created it and compare the two versions. Once you find an interesting shadow, decide what the photograph is really about. Is the main subject the object casting the shadow, or is it the shadow itself? Or is it the relationship between the two? That choice affects everything else in the frame. In this photograph, the windows and plants are visible, but the strong pattern of light and shadow is what holds the image together. The shadow is not merely present, it has a job. After deciding what is primary, simplify the composition. Move a little closer, step left or right, check the edges of the frame for bright spots or objects that pull attention away from the main area. With shadow photography, extra details can weaken the shapes very quickly. Try removing anything that does not help the photograph. Also, experiment with orientation. Take a horizontal version, a vertical version, or perhaps even a square crop. You can even rotate the image. Abstract shadow photographs do not always need the obvious top or bottom. A useful question is, what can I remove without losing the idea of a photograph? The goal is one clear visual decision, not a frame full of competing information.
I have a theory. If something is painted black, it's probably good for photography. So black garden sieve. Yeah. Hello, I'm Gavin Hoey and you're watching Adorama TV, brought to you by Adorama, the camera store that's got everything for us photographers. And this video has a connection between a garden sieve and some lace fabric. They are both going to make great cookies. And cookies are something that casts shadows. This video is all about creating the sharpest possible shadows in a small home studio. Now to get there, we're going to play around with light a little bit, and we're going to play around with light modifiers like this. I've just thought of another one. Hold on. I've forgotten about this. Underneath the rug is this. It's got holes, it's black. This is going to make a great cookie too. Right. You need to click on the bell icon and the subscribe button so you never miss a video right here on Adorama TV. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to set a light up. Let's get a model in. Let's get shooting. So to help me out today, I've got the amazing Sophie. Sophie is going to be the model for this photo session, but before we get going, we should have a very quick look at the difference between hard light and soft light. Well, actually, it's not the light, it's the shadows, because normally I would take pictures of Sophie using one of these, a softbox. It gives lovely, soft, flattering lighting and looks gorgeous, rather than using one of these, which is a standard reflector, and the shadows from this are much crisper and sharper, and frankly, it's just a little less flattering. So why do I get softer light with this one compared to the reflector? Well, it's simply because of its size relative to the subject. The bigger the light source, the softer the shadows. The smaller the light source, the harder the shadows. And for this setup, we want the hardest shadows possible, so we want the smallest light source possible. So we'll start with this one. Usually when I'm working in the studio, the first picture I take is without any flash, and that's important, but today it's essential. So I've dialed in some settings, f5.6, ISO 200, 250th of a second, the native settings for my particular camera. And I'm going to take a picture of Sophie without any flash firing. Here we go. And I've got no flash, no picture. That means I've got the usual control of the room lights, but in this case, those are the darkest possible shadows that I can actually get in this photo session. And as this session is all about the shadows, that's really important. Let's run through the basic setup. The first thing you need is something to cast an interesting shadow. And I've got the classic black lace. To the left is Sophie, to the right is my flash, and the flash is the Flashpoint Explore 300. I've got the reflector on, and they're roughly equidistant apart. Now, I've already metered this out for f5.6, and there's a reason I'm using the Flashpoint Explore 300 over something like a Speedlight, and it's because it has a really good modeling lamp. Now, this allows me to see the projection of the black lace fabric on the wall. I can see it on Sophie. This is all going to look really good. Let's take a test photo, see what we get. Here we go, Sophie. And when I do, well, what just happened? It's disappeared. There isn't that amazing pattern. I can see it with my eyes, but the camera can't. And that's because the camera sees the flash tube, we're seeing the modeling lamp, and they are not the same light. Probably the easiest solution for this is just to make the light smaller. So I'm going to do that by increasing the distance between the flash and the object we're casting a shadow from, the black lace. So at the moment, I can see the projection, it's there, but it's not particularly sharp. As I move the light further away, it becomes relatively smaller and therefore much harder, which makes the light we're projecting much sharper. And that's about as far back as I can possibly get it in my small home studio. So that is as good as it's going to be. Of course, if you move the light, you need to remeter the light. So I'm going to put my flash meter this side of the fabric, and you might think the other side would be better, but Sophie is so close to the fabric, it's really not going to make any difference at all. Right, back to f5.6. Let's take a test photo and see how this looks. Okay, Sophie, here we go. And straight away you can see the vast improvement. Now we can actually see the shadows projected onto Sophie. This is what we're aiming for. Now I could stop there, but I've also got this, which is a conical snoot. And when you compare the size of the light you get from a standard reflector compared to a conical snoot, well, this is obviously much smaller. And as we know, smaller light sources give us crisper shadows, which is exactly what we want. So let's pop that on there. The only downside with the conical snoot is it takes a lot of light away. We can put the modeling lamp on just to make sure that we get it in the right place, because it's also much more directional than the other light. And I'm going to increase the power of that. Well, I'm not going to try and meter, it's too small a light source. I'm going to guess half power. Let's see how that looks. Okay, Sophie, here we go. Yeah, huge difference. Now we have much crisper shadows, and in my small home studio, those shadows are as sharp as I'm going to get. The only thing I might want to change is the back of Sophie where she's disappearing into the shadows, and for that I'm going to use a second light. So this is an optional light. It is the Flashpoint Evolve 200. It's on its lowest possible power, and it's just going to put a little bit of an edge light on Sophie just to lift her off of this black background. Let's just test that, see how it looks. Okay, Sophie, here we go. Fantastic. So that's the lighting setup. I've got a whole bunch of different things we can use to cast shadows, but for now let's start with this and see where we go. Sophie, are you ready? Okay, let's take some photos. The more you look around the house, the more weird things you find that might work. So I've got a few different things to try. And let's start with this, which is actually the rubber matting that normally lives underneath the rugs to stop them sliding around. theory, anything that blocks light but also has holes in it should work. So this is a placemat. I don't think we've ever used it as a placemat. Let's see how this goes. Not sure if this is going to work. This is a sieve from the garden. A lot more holes than I was expecting, but well, let's give it a try. So from random placemats to garden equipment to black lace, I gotta say, it really has been great fun playing with random objects and seeing what creates great shadows. Some things definitely worked better than others. Now, if you've enjoyed this video or you've got any questions, don't forget to leave me a comment down below. Click on the bell icon and you'll never miss a video right here in Adorama TV. And we have new videos, well, pretty much.
Once you find interesting shadow, decide what the photograph is really about. Is the main subject the object casting the shadow or the shadow itself? Or is the relationship between the two? Okay. Delete, 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 delete. We're on slide 8. 4 by this thing. Okay. Page 8, there it is. That demonstration showed how the position of the light, the curtain, and the person can completely change the sharpness and shape of the shadow. Once we have a strong shadow, the next step will be making sure the camera records that contrast with the same impact we see. Once the composition is working, expose controls how much drama the shadow has. Exposure controls how much drama the shadow has. The first priority is to protect the highlights. In this photograph, the bright wall still has texture and detail. If that area became completely white, the shadow would have nothing to contrast against. For a camera, try using exposure compensation to make this image slightly darker. You are not trying to brighten every dark area. In a shadow photography, deep shadows can be part of the design. On a phone, tap the brightest important area of the scene, then drag the exposure control downward until you can see detail in the light areas and the shadow becomes stronger. Phones can often try to brighten dark areas automatically. That can flatten the contrast and weaken the pattern, so check the image after you take it. The important question is, does the dark exposure make the shape clearer and more interesting? Take more than one version. Try the automatic exposure, then a darker version, and compare them. Black and white can help when the colors compete with the lines and shapes. It removes the color information and lets the contrast do the work. Now we're going to put everything together into a simple routine. You can use this wherever you find an interesting shadow. First, find strong light. Look for direct sunlight, window light, or another light source that creates a clear difference between light and dark. Next, find a clean surface. A plain wall, sidewalk, floor, bedspread, or tabletop gives the shadow room to be seen. Then decide what role will the shadow play. Is it the main subject, part of the subject, or a pattern that supports the scene? After that, move and refine. Change your position, move closer or further away, raise or lower the camera. Small changes can completely alter the shape of the shadow. Check the exposure. If the bright areas are losing detail or the shadow feels weak, lower the exposure slightly. Then work the scene. Do not stop after one photograph. Take a wide view to show the surroundings, move closer for simpler composition. Try both horizontal and vertical versions. Change the angle and watch how the shadow changes. In this photograph, the light from the blinds creates repeating lines across the wall, bedding, arm, and hand. The person is part of the scene, but the shadow patterns connect everything. The goal is not to make one perfect photograph immediately. The goal is to explore the possibilities before light moves or disappears. Before you decide that a photograph is finished, pause and review it carefully. First, ask whether the shadow is immediately noticeable. It does not have to be the darkest part of the image, but it should have a clear purpose. Next, look for one strong visual idea. If your eye is pulled in several directions, the composition may need to be simplified. Check the brightest areas. A small bright spot can attract more attention than the shadow, even when it is near the edge of a frame. Check. Now examine all 4 edges. Look for partial objects, bright corners, stray branches, signs, or anything else that slipped into the photograph unnoticed. Consider whether black and white should strengthen the image. It can help wood color distracts from the shape, pattern, or contrast. Also, ask whether a different viewpoint would improve the photograph. Try getting lower, raising the camera, moving closer, or rotating the frame. Most importantly, take more than one version. The first photograph is only the starting point. In this portrait, the pattern of light and shadow creates mood and directs attention towards the face. A small change in the person's position or the camera angle would create a completely different result. A useful experiment is the photograph of the same shadow 3 ways, as part of a larger scene, as a tight graphic pattern, or as an abstract image. Then compare the results and decide which version communicates the idea most clearly. All right, wasn't that fun? Those 4 ideas show how many different ways shadows can become the subject. Now let's take one of the easiest versions indoors and create our own using nothing more complicated than a curtain or light cloth, a light, and someone's hands. This is an easy indoor shadow experiment that requires very little equipment. The ingredients for this simple shadow photo are camera, curtain, hands, and light. The camera stays in the darker side of the curtain. The hands and light are placed behind it, out of view. Start with a plain white sheet or sheer curtain. Hang it smoothly as possible so heavy folds do not detract from the hand shapes. Darken the room and aim one small light towards the back of the fabric. A flashlight, LED panel, or work light will work. A smaller, more direct light usually creates a stronger, clearer shadows. Place the hands between the light and the curtain. When the hands are close to the fabric, the fingers appear sharper and more recognizable. As the hands move farther away, the shadows become larger and softer. This gives you several ways to experiment. Try one hand, 2 hands interacting, a recognizable hand with a shape, or hand shape, or hand holding a small object that's recognizable. Expose for the bright curtain rather for the hands. On a phone, tap the illuminated fabric and lower the exposure slightly. The curtain should retain some detail while the hands become dark silhouettes. Take several versions. Move the hands, change their distance from the curtain, and adjust the position of the light. All right. Well, thank you for coming. Here is a list of my links. This is also on the handout. But I added another video after I created the presentation and this one page. And, by that point, I was like, okay. Anyway, for the super sharp shadows with the guy with the girl model and everything, here's a link to that video. So if you wanted a copy of that video, you can take a picture of the QR code. Thank you for attending. I hope you learned something. Let me know in the comments. Okay, thanks. Bye.